shadow and the moon at night, filling your dreams to the brim with fright.
So, I'm wanting to share a few events leading up to tonight's paranormal events that occurred in my house. But a little backstory. I live in an old home, built in 1917. Been here since 2012, which we moved from a house that was certainly haunted. But anyways, I live here with my dad and my mum until she tragically passed away in October of 2020. So, about a year ago, as if out of the blue, I get a frantic call from my mum, telling me of a demon in the house at around 4 a.m. in the morning, and how she called my dad to come home from work right then and there. He's a firefighter, so he works 24-hour shifts. Because she was so frightened. I won't go into too deep of detail on her story, cause many events occurred, but basically something took the form of my father, was pacing around upstairs and outside her door, imitated his voice, spoke of killing that bitch, and actually roared outside of her door at her exact words. This is what she recalled to us, but in my mind, I didn't want to believe it and half-heartedly shrugged it off as sleepless paranoia or something. Well, she passed due to suicide in October. She wasn't suicidal to our knowledge, and the day before she texted my dad something along the lines of, "I'm moving out of the house tomorrow. The house is haunted." Next day, she's dead. In the following months, I moved back in with my dad to the home, since I didn't want him alone in the house where his wife and my mum tragically passed away. In the months following, I have had terrifying experiences nearly nightly, of footsteps pacing up and down the stairs, almost always starting up around 3 a.m. We have a burglar bar on the door, so nobody can even get past the door to come upstairs. But it's non-stop, and it's very loud. It's come to me being so shook up and almost certain someone was inside and upstairs that I barricaded the door with a mini fridge and a rifle next to me. I hear running around a lot, things being thrown around, etc. Well, last week it intensified a bit, as I was in my parents' room where a lot of this stuff has been heard or has originated. They have a closet, and the door doesn't exactly latch, as the frame in the door no longer seemed to fit after all the years. But it's very stiff, and when it's closed, you nearly have to give it a rough pull to open it. Well, the entire previous night I was hearing the same walking up and down the stairs, and I was basically sitting up in bed and saying prayers from 3 a.m. onwards. It's now 9:30 a.m. and I'm laying in bed. I have my head under the covers and I have the TV playing. All of a sudden, I hear a loud bang in the room. My heart stopped and I pulled my head from under the covers, and bam, the closet door is wide open, and still moving from the force of it being opened. My mouth dropped, and after 15 seconds of sitting there, I got the courage to jump up and ran outside from shock. Weird event. Well, today I got home around 11 p.m. and nobody was home. My dad had quadruple bypass from a sudden heart attack a week prior, but was not home at the moment. I go upstairs to his room, and his closet door is wide open. I'm like, hell no, and shut it and pushed it in real tight. I turned my back. Not even 3 seconds passed, and boom, it flies open so hard that it nearly shuts from the force of it being swung back. I start rebuking any spirits, calling a friend, grabbing my cross, etc. I'm downstairs, still shook up about the fact, and laying on the couch, trying to forget about the whole thing, and it's nearing 3 a.m. This is when I hear the loudest, angriest stomps upstairs I have ever heard. It was extremely loud, like somebody was pissed off and stomping off to start a fight. I jumped up off the couch, looked on the porch in case maybe it was my dad coming home or something. I look and nothing. There is not a soul. At this point, I know for an absolute fact these stomps occurred upstairs, near where the door had swung open. I instantly started to panic and was shaking badly. I grabbed my most important things like my charger and shoes, and literally fled the house as fast as I possibly could. I was shaking so badly that, as I backed out of the house, the brakes were pumping due to my leg going out of control. I fell into tears due to how frightening this was. There is a dark and malevolent energy in my home, and I'm scared to be in the house after dark at this point. This just occurred about exactly 1 hour ago. Just wanted to share a piece of my story for anyone who is interested. Ghosts and the afterlife are a very real thing, and very terrifying at that. I'm not sure what to do with the house, besides sell it at this point. I feel it's responsible, at least partially, for my mum's suicide. Thanks for listening. To anyone who decides to read this.
When I was a kid, me and my family used to live in what I believe a haunted house in the Philippines. It was an old house that my uncle let us use, as we didn't have a house before. I haven't experienced any paranormal events in that house, except that one time where I seen my grandpa, who passed away a few weeks earlier. I got so scared that I had to cover my face with a blanket, and when I looked again, he was gone. Then the next day, I got really sick. My aunt, who is my dad's younger sister, also used to stay with us for a few days, along with some of my cousins. My mom was working in Malaysia at that time, and my dad was a truck driver who travels a lot to deliver bags of rice. So one night, when my aunt stayed with me and my brother at that house, she woke up in the middle of the night and saw a lady dressed in white, standing in front of the mirror, humming while brushing her hair. My aunt said that she tried to scream, but nothing came out of her mouth, and when she tried to move, she couldn't do that either. She said it lasted for a few minutes, and she swore at that time that yes, the house that we lived in was a haunted house. The worst thing that probably happened there was with my dad. I believe my dad's third eye is open, and he is the one that taught me to not be afraid of ghosts, but to be afraid with humans, because ghosts can't hurt you, but humans can. My dad and I used to sleep in the living room together. We were kids then, and we were close to my dad. He would tell us that there is always this one lady dressed in white, sitting on one of the chairs and humming, and he thinks that she guides us at night. One late night, when my dad was coming back from work, he was dropped off by a coworker using the company's truck. But then, something went wrong with the truck. I'm not sure what happened, but for some reasons, they needed a stick to fix it. This was in 1993, so I'm not really surprised. There was a small acacia tree in front of the haunted house, so my dad decided to break a branch from there. And as soon as the branch broke, a lady, dressed in black, with boils all over her face, appeared in front of him. My dad got scared, and then he dropped the branch and went back inside the truck with his coworker. The next day, my dad got really, really sick, and a few days later, I was told that I got really sick as well. We were so sick that they had to rush us in the emergency room to see what was wrong with us. And my family said that I almost died. I forgot what the diagnosis was, but my family said that I had a high fever, and my eyes started to roll uncontrollably. My dad stood by his word about that story, and I do believe that he sees things that some people cannot see. My brother, on the other hand, said that he saw a floating head one night, but I'm not really sure about that. Anyways, I'm not sure who the lady dressed in white was, or what her relation to us is. Because why does she sit on chairs and watch us sleep? Also, I don't know exactly what happened that night when my dad saw the lady with boils on her face, but for some reason, he stopped bothering that tree for a long time, until we moved out of the house. I'm still not sure if that lady also had anything to do with me almost dying. But really, I don't think I want to know. I just asked my dad what else he has seen in the haunted house. He said that in the backyard, he has seen another white lady that he almost bumped into. He said that the lady was walking too fast. Another one was near the house this time, and he said that it was a priest. His friend who saw the priest got sick the next day. Also, take note that the Philippines was colonized by the Spanish, Chinese, Americans, and Japanese, and I think that some of the ghosts were part of the war then, or something.
Do you ever talk to yourself? Did you know that it's an ancient spirit communication game? It was described as a form of necromancy long ago. In order to participate, you need 2 chairs, 1 chair for you and 1 for the spirit. It is said that if you start speaking, then it gives the spirit an invitation to enter your room. I did something very similar inadvertently, and I sensed the presence of the paranormal. I want to share my experience. Back then I was working as a nutritionalist at a hospital. I would be on the first train of the morning, and I wouldn't come home until it was dark out. Even in the summer. I was working some crazy hours. I guess I must have wanted to make an impression at work. It was really tiring. I never wanted to take a day off from work either. On reflection, the lack of rest days was causing me stress. On the rare days I would have off work, I would just sleep and try to recover. If I wasn't remembering giving young patients unwanted gastro cameras, then having pangs of guilt, that is. Due to this lack of social interaction, the number of friends who kept in contact with me after I cancelled plans so many times dwindled. I found that most of my time was spent with myself and my bed. So, this was how it started. I got into bed one night and I just started talking to myself. It sounds mad, right? But let me add some context. The first thing I said was, "Okay, I'll be up and ready to go to work at 4 in the morning and then I'll do it all over again." From that day forward, I'd come home and speak to myself when I was in bed. This went on for some time. I couldn't put a number on the days. One night I was in that eerie place between sleep and consciousness, dozing, and then I sensed something. I felt that something was next to me in the bed. I felt something's weight shift next to me. I instantly opened my eyes to make sure, but no one was there. When I shut my eyes, I had the disturbing feeling that someone was watching me. It was like they were peering down at me in the dark. I couldn't sleep on my back from then on. I had to sleep with my chin tucked against my chest. The unease around sleep lasted for about a month. It wasn't that much of an issue, as I could always get to sleep, so I didn't let it disturb me that much. I guess I was too tired to do anything about it anyway. Then one night, things changed for me, in a big way. I guess I must have fallen asleep on my back. Maybe I was overtired or sick that day. Whatever the reason was, I slipped into sleep paralysis that night. Both of my wrists were grasped by some unseen force. I was completely restrained. I couldn't move at all. All of my doors and windows were locked, so I could quickly rule out a home invasion, right? I had no evidence that someone was in my apartment either. I experienced the exact same thing a few times a month. I mean, sleep paralysis or whatever was going on. I cannot think of another explanation. Or maybe all of this was brought on by stress, or some spirit attached to me at the hospital and followed me home. Or maybe I was careless and forgot to lock the door a few times, but none of my possessions were ever missing. Or maybe I invited something in by beginning talking to myself in that empty apartment. It's really weird. I don't know. I'll update if something happens. There have been no further updates.
Poltergeist in my house? Or is it just my imagination? Okay, so about 1 to 2 years ago, I moved into a new house with my parents. And me and my family have witnessed many suspicious activities. First, when I'm trying to study or read a book, sometimes weird things happen. It's like the book I'm reading is getting grabbed by an invisible creature or person because it doesn't fall or anything. It literally gets grabbed, violently grabbed. The movement of the book when it gets grabbed clearly shows it's not falling. Something is grabbing it. And then when I get it back, it gets grabbed again. It happened multiple times and that really creeps me out, especially because the movements are very human-like. Second, weird things happening in my kitchen. Sometimes the oven turns on alone, and I think someone is playing with the dishes at night because I hear weird noises. Also, sometimes when I'm eating alone or I put something on the table, it's the same thing as the book. It gets grabbed. I didn't get to screenshot anything on the photo except for one thing. When it was night and I was just listening to music, I heard a couple noises near the window. I thought it was just the wind, but a couple of times when I woke up, I noticed a human's hand trace. Well, not that human. It looked very skinny, like it was a skeleton. I took a screenshot of it and immediately went downstairs to tell my family. My mother went upstairs and checked if everything was okay, but the hand trace just disappeared, like it never existed. She and I looked outside, but there was nothing. Since I was upstairs and it was a balcony, I don't know the story of the house or anything, but it's kind of big. We have a garden and a front yard. The garden has a pool, chairs, and well, basically everything a garden has, while the front yard is where our cars are. We have 2 bathrooms, one downstairs, one upstairs, a huge living room, a kitchen and a mini bar. We also have a garage, 4 rooms, 2 water closets, and 2 dressing rooms. We also have 4 dogs, 2 cats, and 1 parrot. I know it must be useless to say that, but maybe it can help. If you want to give me advice, maybe it's just the pets or my family. Sometimes, I also feel like the creature is trying to communicate with me. My sister was playing with her dolls when one of them just moved and was now placed in a very creepy way. She was staring at me and looked like she was trying to hide from my sister and me, trying to silently stalk me without me noticing. It happened many times, and it was always with the same toy. So we decided to stop playing with it. But I think this toy is kinda possessed. I might be paranoid though. Maybe it's just my imagination. Can somebody please give me advice?
When I was 8, and I'm a girl by the way, and my brother 9, we moved with my mum to a very small town after my parents split up. The new house was 2 stories with 3 bedrooms and a den. There was a large bedroom on the main floor with a full bathroom, and so my brother immediately claimed the big room on the main floor with the bathroom, and I was stuck in the purple nightmare. when we were moving, we noticed a lock on the door to my brother's room, but it was odd because it locked from the outside with a key. Eventually, we found the key in the cellar. My mum just brushed it off. The room also only had one window, close to the ceiling, that was long but not wide and didn't open. So it let in light, but you couldn't really see outside unless you stood on something. The other two bedrooms both had a regular lock on the doors that locked from the inside. There was an attic at the top of the stairs that also had a lock on the outside, so we didn't think too much of it. We all went to bed that first night, and I don't remember anything too off myself, just new house strangeness. My brother next morning said the light in his bedroom was flickering, water running, flushing toilet, and he was left a bit freaked out. My mum checked the room out, and everything seemed fine in daylight. He decided to stick it out. We explored the house that day, found the key to the door, and odd leftovers from previous people in the cellar and attic. The attic was right beside my room, and I was a bit spooked by it, but I'm sure that was me just being 8. The next night after I went to bed, I woke up to my brother screaming at the top of his voice, "Mum, help me, please, help!" It was from downstairs. I got there first because my room was nearest, but my mum was right behind me. He was in his bed thrashing, and it looked like he was basically having a fit. When I got closer to his bed, he literally jumped out of it crying and staring at it. He said he felt something on his chest holding him down, and what felt like thumbs being pressed into his eyes, and a voice whispering, "Die out, die out, die out," in his ear. We couldn't see anything in the room, but my brother was adamant that he was not going to sleep there. My mum was trying to cheer him up, and said that he could sleep in her room. My brother and I were halfway up the stairs, which were across from the room, and he asked her to please shut the door. I have never seen him so spooked. She laughed and said okay and went back to close the door, and even made a joke about being able to lock the door now, and did just that. As she started up the stairs towards us, we heard a loud knock on the door coming from the inside. Needless to say, my brother and I screamed bloody murder and ran for my mum's bedroom with her close behind. He moved into the small den the next day. He just couldn't sleep in there, so we turned it into a rec room and had our couch and TV in there instead. He had no issues in there. We never slept in that room, but anyone that came to stay with us said that they would be woken up by activity in the bathroom or catch glimpses of something, but never ever felt what my brother did, thankfully. We only lived there about 1.5 years. It's been 30 years now, and I've always wondered who or what was kept locked in that room, and why.
So when I was a baby, my parents bought an old house in a historical society. There used to be a toll house back in the day. It's approximately 315 years old, but I think I'm lowballing it, and I had never felt completely safe in that house for the 25 years that I lived there. When I was a kid, I thought it was normal to just always feel like you were being watched, and to feel something hanging onto your back. I wasn't allowed to go over to people's houses or have anybody visit until I was at middle school. I remember going to a friend's normal modern house when I was 12 and immediately feeling safe and having a level of privacy. I didn't feel eyes burning into me, and it was so strange to feel. After that, I remember dreading going home. I didn't fully click at the time that my house was odd though, until friends came over and they said that my house was creepy. I remember going to the bathroom whilst they were waiting in my bedroom, and my dad was asleep in bed and my mum was in her office working, which was one floor and several rooms adjacent away. When I came back from the bathroom, they asked me who I was talking to, and I replied, I wasn't talking at all, I was in the bathroom. One friend told me that she heard 2 women whispering just outside my door and thought I was talking to my mum. That moment really chilled me. They were afraid to sleep in my room, and they ended up staying awake all night. I remember that most nights when I would go to bed, it would feel like a man was watching me through my window. I slept on the second floor, and it felt like there would be somebody standing on the roof watching me too, even though I knew that physically there was nobody there. I begged my mum for years to get curtains, but she refused, just as she'd refused to put any curtains up in the entire house. I always felt watched from the roof and backyard, so eventually I put up blankets on the windows to feel safe, but I still felt eyes burning into me. We had a decently furnished basement where my brother and I had all our video games and equipment, and any time I brought friends down there, they would always ask to go back upstairs, but never said why. However, I grew to love and hate the basement, as it was a respite from my mother, but then I would have to deal with the door opening and shutting by itself, as well as feeling hands on my ankles from time to time if I tried to nap. One time I asked my brother if he had ever experienced anything, and he said he would often feel a sensation of a hand by his feet. I ignored it though, because it was either that or deal with my mother. Not getting into that can of worms, but yes, we preferred being terrified instead of dealing with our mother. It soon actually became a running joke not to go into the basement unless you wanted to get grabbed, and it became normal to just feel uncomfortable down there at all times. Not many things happened to me physically at that house. It was almost just feelings of being watched or seeing a figure in my peripheral vision, only to turn around and nothing be there. There are a few more things of note that I can think of now, one being that there were regular footsteps in my parents' bedroom. But unlike everything else that happened in that house, this was comforting. In the summer we would sleep on my parents' floor, because it saved on AC, and I would stay up late on my Game Boy whilst my parents slept. But frequently the sound and feeling of footsteps would go past me on the floor. This was when I was very young, and it was just a normal thing. They made me feel safe, like whoever was walking around was making sure everything was all right. Even as I got older and would sit in the room directly below, if I heard the footsteps up there whilst my parents were in other rooms, I kind of felt at ease, and that whoever was up there wanted me to know they were there. Now we had quite a large backyard, about an acre of land, and it was really pretty. But I would often have terrifying nightmares about it most nights. I would have bad dreams about people dragging me out there, or wild animals attacking me whilst figures watched. I honestly believe people may have died out there, and I stayed out of the backyard as much as possible when I lived there, as those dreams plagued me for years. The last thing I can think of off the top of my head was when I was in senior year of high school. My mum and I were really at odds, as I was the only child left in the house, and she kept asking me to sleep on the floor in the living room. At this point in my life, she slept on the couch, and my dad slept in the bed, because he genuinely snores so loud she couldn't take it. But I really didn't want to sleep in there with her, as the living room has 4 large windows, 2 facing outside and 2 facing the backyard. I hated it. I reluctantly agreed, and remember her leaving the TV on some animal channel when she fell asleep. I was laying on the floor and looking at my phone, when I suddenly felt a full hand, palm and fingers being placed on the back of my head. I was then very abruptly shoved by my head down into the pillow, and I'm getting anxious writing about it now, as the only people home were my mum, myself and my dad. I could hear my dad snoring upstairs, and my mum was 5 feet away on the couch. I was utterly terrified and yelled, "Stop!" then hid under the pillow in fear. My mum freaked out and had no idea what was going on, and I was too afraid to move. She didn't believe me when I told her what had happened, and I remember going back up to my bedroom and praying to whatever God would listen to keep me safe from whatever had just shoved me. I could still feel the phantom sensation of that hand, and I pretty much never went into the living room again after that, unless it was daytime and somebody else was with me. The older I got, the less safe I felt in that house. I eventually isolated myself in the bedroom when I wasn't at school or work. But I couldn't fall asleep until 8 or 9 in the morning. I just always felt watched. I started buying white and black candles from the local pagan store, as they told me white was to promote positive energy and black was to protect my mind. You can imagine after 25 years of this weirdness and feeling unsafe, I was willing to try anything to keep me feeling somewhat sane. It helped a lot, but maybe it was just a placebo. Who knows? Now I live in an apartment very far away from that house and experience 0 paranormal things. I don't feel watched, I don't feel scared, I don't have nightmares, and I finally feel safe. I hate going there to visit my parents.
This was a while ago now, 2015-ish, and I still have PTSD from that time. I was sitting at the table, eating dinner around 6 PM, and had a funny feeling that something was behind me. So I turned around and seen what seemed to be like a mix of light and fog float past the couch in my living room. It was definitely shaped like a human, but I was quick to shake it off, thinking that I'm just seeing things, cause I didn't want to scare myself. So I turn back around to eat, and I see my sister that's sitting opposite the couch where I'd just seen the apparition, making a funny face. She looks at me and says, "Did you see that?" And that's when I realized to myself, oh shit, I've just seen a ghost. I quickly go outside to try debunk the situation, whether or not it could be a car coming up the driveway, but there was nothing. The house I was living at the time had a really long driveway with multiple residents, so I was hoping it might have been one of them, but nope. Pretty much after we had seen that, the energy in the house changed and things started getting really weird. Like, for one, I was left home alone one night while my old man went to work for night shift. So I would go around the house and close all the doors and make sure they can't open. So I know that if one is open, I know for sure it wasn't the wind or something like that, and I would always make sure the front door was unlocked. Well, I get a call from my old man telling me to unlock the door, and I say to him, "It is." And he says to me, "Nope, it's pretty locked, 'cause I'm outside." I walk toward the door in disbelief, thinking, I swear I left it unlocked, I'm so sure of it. And as I got to the door, I noticed the door to the garage was wide open, which was pretty much next to the front door, and the damn door was locked as well. From that night onwards, I was traumatized for what seemed like an eternity. I could no longer sleep with that white noise in the background. I would have a fan on while playing a podcast of our local radio station. I lived like that for a few years. I'm not anywhere near as bad as I was now since I moved out, but now and again I play their podcast to help me sleep. I never want to experience something like that again. I was skeptical about ghosts till that happened. Hauntings carried on for a few months until the house was blessed by a minister.
Back in 2012, my family moved to this fairly isolated house in the mountains of Colorado. The house was big, pretty ugly on the outside, and just kind of creepy in general. The first day we moved in, I saw this miniature door that led to the attic. 12 or so year old me was curious and went up there to explore, but all I found was a tiny piece of paper with a Bible verse on it. Unfortunately, I've completely forgotten which verse it was, but it did creep me out a tiny bit. Anyways, after that, I never personally saw anything weird for at least a year or two. However, my older sister claimed to have had these paranormal experiences fairly often. One time, she said she was lying on her bed, and suddenly this large candle she had on her desk just launched itself across the room, hitting the wall, the glass case shattering everywhere. I personally didn't know what to make of her story, as I never saw it, and I've always been skeptical about any paranormal experiences. Not long after that, she claimed there was a bird right outside her window staring at her. I forget if it was a bat or an owl, but I want to say it was an owl. She acted like it stared at her forever, but once again, I didn't know what to think of it. She isn't one to lie about stuff like that, and she's claimed to have had many other similar experiences in past houses. So either she's just crazy, or for some reason, spirits or something like to mess with her. Anyways, this part is the reason I'm posting this at all. One night, I was trying to sleep when I noticed something move in front of my closet. When I looked, I saw this young girl kind of just float toward me. She didn't seem to move any muscle at all. She was just standing straight up, no facial expression at all. At first, she moved very slowly toward me, but her speed got exponentially faster. By the time she reached the end of my bed, she was moving faster than I could run. For some reason, her speed always bothered me, but I feel like I can't understate how fast she was going at the end. I jumped out of my bed in pure panic, and then she was gone. I'm sorry for making this so long. This is my second draft, and it's hard for me to keep it short because there's just so much I have to say about it. Real quick, I'd like to add a few more notes about what she looked like. She seemed really young, yet she was about as tall as an adult. She had very long, straight black hair, wore an all-white dress. She kind of always reminded me of the ghost girl from that oldish game Fear, but unlike her, she didn't really look evil at all. She looked very calm and was dressed up really fancy. Once again, I'm sorry for making this so long. Thanks for reading.
So this goes a few years back, to 2018 if I remember right. It's been a while. I've been talking about it pretty much to everyone I know. I'm a 21-year-old male. So it all started in my parents' apartment, in the winter of 2018 in Finland. My parents had come home to find that one of the water pipes under the house had broken. It was a rat that had broken it. This caused major damage to the house. The kitchen, sauna, and bathroom had to be torn open before drying and rebuilding. During this time, my parents had to rent another house to use a shower, make dinner, and wash clothes. Luckily, one well-known family had a spare house just 3 kilometers away. The house wasn't more than 50 years old, and nothing had happened there before we got there. The first 2 months went well. After that, my parents and my brothers discovered one self-rolled cigarette on the table of the laundry room, although my father didn't roll his own cigarettes back then. Also, the inner back door used to be unlocked and opened whenever we came back from a day out. We locked it every time we left. Our first thought was that some addict had gotten inside the house and started sleeping there or something. The house was in a populous area, and neighbors had seen nothing moving there. After that, the house was quiet for some time. Some months later, I went running after work and had to take a shower. I didn't even remember any odd things about the house, because nothing had happened in quite a while. I was alone. After my shower, I was stretching downstairs and listening to music. I was ready to leave, but decided to check the fridge for leftover food, so I decided to turn back. There was nothing to eat, but I noticed a bag of bubblegum on top of the fridge. As I was trying to reach it, I heard a loud creak above my head, upstairs. I heard 2 more right after, as if someone was trying to reach it. It was as if someone was trying to sneak upstairs. At this moment, I remember the attic thing, and then I got scared. I grabbed a pole that was hanging on one of the walls, and I started yelling that I'm going to call the cops. I took my stuff and ran outside. I then called my mother to tell her there was someone inside the house. She told me not to call the police, even though I was shaking and almost crying as I held the phone. I stayed close by for a while, and watched the house to see if someone came out, but I saw nothing. Sometime later, maybe a few weeks, I can't exactly remember, my brother, who was 16 at the time, was left alone in the house. He was left alone quite frequently. He called us and told us someone was inside the house with him. He was coming from the shower, and right after he opened the bathroom door, he heard hard, heavy breathing upstairs for a few seconds. He ran into the kitchen to get the biggest knife, yelled that he was armed, and packed his stuff as fast as possible and ran outside. Our parents just said our imagination was running wild, and we should be quiet, as they didn't want to scare our younger brothers. They just refused to believe that there would be someone or something in there. But man, me and my brother were sure that there was something. As no one believed us, we decided to spend one evening there, lights shut off and sitting on the living room couch. Before that, we checked every room, we opened every cabinet, and even looked under the carpets. Nothing. We waited for someone to enter the house as we were sitting in the dark. The first hour was quiet, as we were just chilling and talking. We even forgot our main mission, to catch the addict sneaking in there. And then we heard one of the 3 doors upstairs opening. Click. And then the long creak. We rushed to the stairs to see the door open. The room in the stairway was empty. We closed the door and went back downstairs. It wasn't even 5 minutes before we heard a noise upstairs. It was like someone was dragging heavy plastic right above us. We heard it for a few minutes, and then it stopped. We decided that was enough for one evening. We checked the rooms, every window and door, and then we left the house. There was no one inside. I spoke about the night to a few of my friends, and they laughed in my face as I told them something was going on there. Well, because of all of them, we were so convinced it was nothing, and that we were just imagining it. I told them I'm going there in the dead of night, and that they are coming with me. They agreed to come. We did the same thing as we did with my brother. We went to the living room, and then proceeded to sit in the dark. It was quiet for at least an hour. My friends were sure I had just imagined everything. Then I started humorously calling the spirit of the house, and played the book of Psalms out loud from my phone as I was doing it. My friends were ready to leave. One of them said I was crazy and I should go home to sleep. About 2 seconds after that, click, followed by the creaking of a door, but this time it was the bedroom door in front of us, downstairs. All of us saw the door opening, and everyone froze still. We were waiting quietly. After that, the dragging noise from before started, but from a different room upstairs. We were slightly in shock. We decided it was enough, as it was 3 a.m., and I had to wake up at 5 a.m. to work, so we all put on our jackets and shoes, and were about to leave the house. Suddenly, all the glasses in the kitchen cabinet started to shake. We just left the house and jumped into the car. We continued to talk about those things as I was dropping my friends home, one by one. We are all sure that those sounds were not a draft of air. The timings would have been too perfect. After I brought my friends, it all stopped. No more doors opened, no more noise. It was a completely normal house again. But one of my friends in the group that evening, who we'll call Pina, his parents were about to move by that time, and that house was on sale. The house was sold to someone else, but sometime later the new owners called Pina's parents, and they asked if there was anything unusual in that house. The new owners told them that there were some kids' toys that just appeared upstairs, and they found one small red handprint on one of the walls. They called a priest and had him bless the house. I didn't hear anything about them after that, so I'm guessing they got rid of whatever that was. But my first thought was, what if that thing inside of the house moved over to my friend's house? We may never know.
I grew up in southern Pennsylvania, not far from Gettysburg. When I was 8 years old, My parents decided to build a house on vacant property surrounded by fields, and it was beautiful. I lived with both of my parents and my 2 older brothers who were 15 and 17 at the time. Although I grew up in the area, we only stayed in this house for 4 years. My first night there was not what I expected it to be. I was laying in my bed and had closed my eyes. Then I hear a voice that sounded like a soft whisper about 6 inches from my face say, "Help," over and over, just repeating the same word until I fell asleep. I tried my best to forget about it because I thought there'd be no way the house could be haunted. It was brand new. About a month goes by and I'm sitting on my bed, doing what I used to love doing most, which was read. I glanced up and looked at my doorway because I saw something out of the corner of my eye. At that moment, I had officially seen a full-body apparition of what appeared to be a soldier from the 1800s, but he didn't see me. He was just walking by my room very slowly. I still remember every detail of his appearance 20 years later. He was covered in blood and looked like he'd been shot or stabbed. This lasted for about 5 seconds. Still being creeped out, my curiosity got the best of me, and I walked out of my room and searched all over the house, but found nothing unusual. About a week or 2 goes by, and I'm in bed trying to fall asleep, yet again only to be disturbed before I even had the chance to close my eyes by a voice that was very deep and masculine. I couldn't understand a word it was saying because it was speaking in a different language. It sounded annoyed and angry. It happened every night at exactly the same time for 2 weeks before it suddenly stopped. After that, I had a night terror. I'm absolutely terrified of spiders. I had woken up in the middle of the night and I could see what looked like a tarantula crawling on me in bed. I swear it was there. I definitely saw it. I was panicked. My dad came in the room to check on me, found out everything was okay. Before I could fall asleep, I heard what sounded like 2 men laughing right next to my bed. At this point, I was getting used to messed up things happening. One summer, I stayed up late every night so I could watch Hannah Montana at midnight. One night, when the clock struck midnight, I heard my back door downstairs open. Then I would hear a woman say my name, as if she was calling for me. I'd hear the door shut, followed by footsteps. Then there would be silence. It happened every night for almost 2 months. It never failed. It didn't even bother me at that point. I knew it wasn't my mother because she worked 12-hour night shifts at the hospital almost every night. There were no other females around. But one night, it stopped altogether. I was up at midnight and nobody had called my name. I went to sleep and everything felt peaceful. I woke up to the sound of someone knocking on my bedroom door. I looked at the clock on my cable box. It was 3 a.m. I assumed it was one of my brothers and told them to go away, but then the doorknob started turning, but it wouldn't open because the door was locked. I have always slept with my bedroom door open, always, and I definitely wasn't the one who locked it. The knocking and doorknob rattling went on for what felt like forever, then it stopped. A few minutes later, I hear what sounds like scratching at the door. I think to myself, the hell? Is it my cat? But then the knocking, scratching, and turning of the handle started happening at exactly the same time. No way in hell my cat could do all 3 at once, let alone the knocking and turning my doorknob. It would happen for about 30 seconds, then it would stop. It happened at least 5 times. Sometimes the knocking would be so hard, it sounded like pounding, my whole door was shaking. Whatever was on the other side of that door really wanted to come in. It got so bad, it woke my dad up. He heard all of the commotion, and as soon as he opened his bedroom door, it all stopped Instantly, he called out to me, but I was too afraid to say anything. He went back in his room and closed the door, but the same scenario repeated itself 3 more times. My dad made me sleep in his room. We never spoke about it, ever. Things seemed to be fine for a while. Then whatever was in my house struck again. My brother had got up to go to the bathroom. He turned the hallway light on, noticed my bedroom door was closed as it was across the hall from the bathroom. He comes out of the bathroom and the hallway light is off, and my bedroom door was wide open. He looked inside my room and saw me still sleeping. Everyone else in the house was sleeping. He woke my dad and my brother and told them what had happened, and they searched the house for a possible intruder, but found nothing. More months go by, and we're all awoken by our smoke detector going off in the middle of the night. We all go downstairs in a panic, just to find out our stove was on, full blast. Big ass flame at the top of the stove, in the middle of the night. What the hell? One day, it was just my father and me. My mum was at work as usual. My oldest brother was at work, and my other brother was at baseball practice. I'm downstairs, but I hear what sounded like somebody running upstairs. Forgetting that both of my brothers aren't home, I go up the stairs and see someone run into my brother's room and slam the door. It was loud. I thought for sure it was my brother, and I wanted to go in there and see what he was up to and why he would be running around like that. I opened the door, and nobody was there. I watched the door close right in front of me. I felt sick to my stomach, just standing there, realizing the only other person that was home with me was my father, who was in the shower. I continued to see weird stuff all of the time. One day, in the middle of the day, I saw my German Shepherd run upstairs full blast, as if she was chasing something, but I didn't see what she was chasing. Whatever it was went under the bed, and she was viciously growling at it. I thought it was my cat until I saw him sitting on top of the bed, who appeared to be sleeping until we burst in. One night, my cousin was spending the night. We were walking through the living room when she saw the reflection of another person in the glass of our big bookcase. Another time, we were in my backyard, and she told me she saw somebody looking at us through the window on a few occasions. And it definitely wasn't anybody we knew. My brothers almost never had friends over, so that was not a possibility. I remember one day I was walking down the basement stairs. When I got to the bottom of the stairs, I saw what looked like another apparition. Except the apparition looked exactly like my oldest brother, but it also didn't look human. It was almost white and blue, and his eyes were pure black. When he saw me, his eyes got really big and looked terrified and ran away and went into the crawl space. I ran my ass upstairs to find my brother wasn't even home. I never went back down there after that. A few months later, I was with the same brother, and we were in the living room watching George Lopez late at night. I'm into the show, but he muted the TV. He looked at me and said, "Did you hear that?" I told him no, I didn't hear anything. We sat for a minute. Then, I heard it. Together, we both heard footsteps coming from the basement stairs. My brother grabbed a baseball bat, and we went to the basement to investigate, but to no avail. The rest of our family was sleeping upstairs. The next night, my mum was up late at night sitting at the dining room table doing whatever it was that she was doing. Around 3 a.m, the shelf in the dining room wall fell off the wall and put a hole in the wall that was directly adjacent to it. We looked at the nails in the wall that held the shelf up, and they were still perfectly straight. We moved out of the house when I was 12. I still experience paranormal things, but not anything that comes close to what we dealt with in that house. I believe there were a lot of spirits there, and I'd love to know about what happened there previously to cause so much activity. We were a regular, church-going family. If there was anything demonic there, it just pisses it off even more. Part of me always wanted to reach out to the current owner and ask them if they've experienced anything, but I don't want to creep them out. I have never thought of it being an old battleground, but it would make a lot of sense. The funny thing is that I had a neighbor who moved into their house right after we moved into ours, and they moved out after only 2 years. I wonder if they had anything happen too.
A few years ago, when I first started university, my dad bought a new house. This was in a new residential neighborhood, and his reasoning in buying a new home is so that he could secure a new property before the housing prices rose again. True to his word, after renovations were done and we were ready to move in, the market value of this house before renovation doubled, sitting at about $120,000. Staying at this new house, all is going pretty well. My room is 4 times larger than my old one, so I'm not complaining. The only downside is, other than having to move 40 minutes away and leaving behind my gang, is that we moved at the start of the new semester and I would be staying at the dorms. No big deal. It's not like I would be stuck there for months on end. During one of my visits home, my room felt off, as though someone else had stayed there. I asked my mother if someone had stayed over, but she answered no. Maybe I was just tired from the trip back. That or the stupid amount of assignments handed out was giving me anxiety. Shrugging it off, I went about my day as normal. Night came, and as I was watching anime, finally had some time to watch some in peace. I only stopped when the clock read 2 a.m., and as I was getting comfortable in bed, I heard it. Soft scratching noises and light thumps coming from the ceiling. Okay, I thought to myself, what the fuck was that? The noises persisted. Soft scratching, followed by small thumps, as though something was walking in the ceiling. It went on, going from one end of the ceiling to the other, passing over me several times. At this point, I was too sleepy to worry about this and chalked it up to either squirrels or bats. Not unusual, since I'd gone up there into the ceiling and found squirrel scat everywhere. Settling down, I did my best to ignore the noises and drifted into a fitful sleep. This went on for several months. Every time I went home and night fell, I would hear these scratching and thumping noises whenever it got late. At this point, I stopped staying up late into the night and went to bed early. But for some goddamn reason, those noises would occur regardless of whether I went to bed at 9 p.m. or 3 a.m. Always scratching, always thumping. I would wake up at odd hours. Half an hour would pass, but it felt as though I was asleep for longer. 4 hours would feel like 10 minutes. I actually discussed this with my mother, but she claimed she never heard anything. At this point, I had convinced myself it was a squirrel or a bat problem, refusing to believe that my house was haunted, and to be more specific, my room. I told myself, when my dad gets home from his work overseas, and I'm home too, maybe I'll discuss hiring an exterminator. Fast forward a month. My dad returned from Saudi Arabia and was enjoying the quiet at home. I was staying in the dorms when he returned. We talked on the phone a lot, and when it was time to go home, my family picked me up at the university instead of waiting for me to arrive at the train station. We chatted, had lunch, drove around a bit, and then went home. When I first entered my room, the tiles felt sandy, almost gravelly. I looked down and saw the floor was sprinkled with salt and peppercorns. I hesitated entering my room. Then to hell with it, I entered. For the first time since I stayed at this house, my room actually felt like my room. After sorting out my stuff, I went down and enjoyed family time. However, I felt a need to ask about the peppercorn and salt, but thought against it at that time, maybe after night prayers. Come nightfall, after the whole family finished with night prayers in the living room downstairs, I asked my dad about the peppercorn and salt. I saw his face go from calm to grim. He laid out what happened in the last 2 days. When he came home, as usual, he would lead prayers in the living room with my mom. For clarification, we're a Muslim family. As he gave the last salam, he heard something scampered upstairs. Not animal scampers either. These were unmistakably human steps, running up the stairs. My dad froze, debating to himself on whether it was his imagination or if he actually heard it. His answer came when my mom tapped him on the shoulder and asked, "Honey, did you hear that? Like something ran up the stairs?" My dad turned to my mom and nodded, confirming that it wasn't his imagination. Something was watching when they prayed, and when he was done, ran off upstairs. The following day was a blur. They contacted the local Muslim leader and asked his help to settle the issue. The imam, with his personal congregation, visited the house, and after assessing it, went forward with the fencing ritual. A fencing ritual was a ritual to put up a barrier around the target. That's where the salt and peppercorns came from. The species of whatever was residing in our home hated salt and peppercorn as it supposedly burns them. After they made the barrier, they held a Quran recitation downstairs in the living room and another in my goddamn room. The thing made its home in my room and was trying to expand downstairs. After the recitation was done and they had left, my dad asked my mom if I had asked anything weird in the past few weeks or months when he wasn't there. She confirmed that yes, I had asked once, but that was it. A week before my dad returned home, my mom started hearing those same noises in her bedroom ceiling. Soft scratches, followed by thumping sounds. After all of this was told, I was silent. I would be lying if I said I wasn't spooked. After dinner, I excused myself to my room, saying that I wanted an early night. I lied, instead staying up until 2 a.m., watching anime silently on my laptop to kill time. As I tucked myself into the bed sheets, I closed my eyes and listened. Apart from the occasional barking from the stray dogs and occasional cars cruising by, it was quiet. A peaceful quiet. As my drowsiness consumed me, one thing crossed my mind. Finally, I can get some sleep.
Alright, so check this out. My childhood home was built by my own grand-something father. He has stayed in our family since forever. My mother claims that her paternal side of the family were always rather sensitive to paranormal stuff, despite trying hard to hide this. While the entire house was iffy and plain uncomfortable to live in, there was a certain room that no one could bear to stay in. That used to be my grandparents', but they couldn't handle it and decided that my aunt would sleep there. My aunt wasn't able to either and ended up sleeping anywhere but her own bedroom. When my own parents took over, I was about 4 years old, and of course, they gave me the bedroom. Not that I knew any of this until many years later. Both my parents went to great lengths in order to convince me and my brother that paranormal stuff was just made up in order to scare little kids. It doesn't change the fact that I went from sleeping through the night since I was 3 months old to barely being able to sleep at all. I would complain about seeing someone scary and dangerous in my room. I still remember the pure terror I felt every single night going to bed. I couldn't sleep unless I was hidden under the comforter while facing the wall, with a CD drowning out the noise with folk tales and Christmas carols playing in the background. After a while, my little brother started sleeping in the same room, due to his being repainted. It lasted for a couple of days before my mother decided that the two of us should sleep in her room while she slept in mine. My father was away for weeks at a time due to work. She told me later on that she decided to do that because my brother woke up screaming. I'm a really heavy sleeper and I didn't notice. And the next day, she saw bruises and what looked like scratches on his back and around his neck. She slept there that one night, but she ended up joining us in her own room after. She apparently woke up, unable to breathe during the night, and when she looked up, she saw someone on top of her. She was being choked by them. She really thought she was going to die, but she managed to throw the thing off of her before running out of the room. After that night, nobody ever slept in my bedroom again. Me and my brother were clueless, despite us both being terrified of what resided inside my bedroom. Our mom simply pretended that it was nice for me and my brother to share the big bed, while she took over my brother's room. This greatly helped my sleep and general feeling of terror, despite still feeling scared every night in that house. I never felt scared anywhere else. Neighbors and friends would also tell us that they saw someone in the window of my bedroom, despite none of us ever being there. None of us were even tall enough to look out the window. My dad eventually bought me some porcelain dolls so they could tell the people who asked that it was just probably the dolls set up in the windowsill. I never knew any of this until much later on, but it got to the point that people actually started avoiding walking past our house alone because they thought it was haunted. Me and my brother, and even random kids from primary, would talk about and mention and interact with people in my home who weren't there. My mom always played it off, but you can't really do much when a random kid is asking you about the old man sitting in the chair, or when your son asks about the old lady who was petting his feet in the morning. Eventually, the house burned down. This was the second house fire that we all survived. We rebuilt, and my mom had the place exorcised at least 10 times by all sorts of different people, from priests to people who claimed to be clear-sighted or able to talk to angels, and practitioners of the occult. That was done in secret, of course. When we moved back in, it was better for a while. Personally, I repressed all memories and ideas regarding anything paranormal or scary. I convinced myself I was just afraid of the dark as a kid. I lived a couple of years in ignorant bliss, but then it started again. Little things, at first, hearing someone coming through the front door just to walk up the stairs and look around before leaving again when I was home alone. I thought it was a family member ignoring my greeting and was mighty insulted until I found at dinner that no one had been there. Then I started having trouble sleeping again, but only in my own bedroom. I never had nightmares, but I did have trouble calming down enough to fall asleep. I had a big clump in my chest, feeling like something terrible would happen at any minute. My current bedroom is roughly in the same place as the previous one. My toddler brother started talking to people. He had a name for one of them that he would always laugh and smile at. But there was also one which terrified him and would make him start shaking while staring transfixed and cry about mean and scary. I felt my soul leave my body the first time that I held him during this. His eyes would follow movements that I couldn't see. Then, my cousin came to sleep over with my aunt. Only problem was that he couldn't fall asleep because of those scary people chanting my initials over and over, and the man who would walk in to stare at him from time to time when he was in bed. This was not my bedroom this time. Eventually, I started feeling like someone was walking into my room every night, but I convinced myself that I was just being paranoid due to my recent trouble falling asleep. Sometimes I would hear my youngest brother, at this point he was a young child, I could hear him knocking on the walls. I often humored him, and I knocked back. This continued for several weeks until I asked my mom, who slept in the same room as him, why he was awake and knocking on the walls when he should have been asleep. She said that he'd only done that once when she was trying to put him to sleep, but that she'd put a stop to it. My brother confirmed it later when I asked him about it. I spent weeks knocking different tunes and repetitions back and forth with someone through the walls, but nobody else ever heard it. I immediately quit it, and the wall that I'd seen as a safe space became another thing that frightened me. It didn't take too long after that before I regularly felt someone's breath on my face after having closed my eyes when trying and failing to fall asleep. I couldn't handle this, and I started staying awake at night to avoid it. I eventually moved out, and all the problems disappeared. I didn't lay paranoid in bed waiting for shit to happen. I didn't feel scared, and I fell asleep easily and peacefully. I still got my room back at my parents' place, and I've recently moved back. I thought I was over whatever the fuck was going on, but the more time that I spend in my bedroom here, the more I start feeling like I used to. I can feel the staring and the breathing whenever I spend too long falling asleep at night. The heavy feeling in my chest is back, and I don't feel fully rested when I wake up anymore, despite sleeping heavily with only good dreams. I don't want to believe in paranormal shit because I find it terrifying, but I can't explain all of the shit from my childhood any other way. I honestly feel kind of crazy just thinking about all this stuff, but there are so many other people who have experienced shit around my family home that I just can't ignore it, even though I'd like to. Here's a fun fact. The rebuilt house was hit by lightning that caused a minor earthquake which woke up the entire neighborhood. The house was glowing green, according to eyewitnesses.
Okay, so we've all heard of hauntings and such, but has anyone ever heard of house schools? I've had some weird occurrences in my life, and I just want to know if anyone has seen or heard of the same. I call them house schools, but I don't know what they're actually called. Some say they are the reasons for arguments and disruptions inside the home, and can be brought in by messing with certain doors you can't close. They lurk inside your homes, undetected by the naked eye. They live inside the cracks and walls of your home. Mainly crawl spaces, attics, or basements. Not sure if they're supernatural beings, but I once encountered it. Me and the neighbor's house were maybe 80 or 100 feet away when I lived in South Jersey, near Vineland. The neighbors aren't what you would call quiet neighbors. They had the county police out there a couple times, mainly domestic calls for their adult son from within the home. He may have autism or some other type of learning or developmental disability, because he would lash out in anger sometimes in the household. It was just the father and the mother with their son residing there. One night, the ambulance and police came out to the house, and they brought the son out of the home on a stretcher, screaming pennies or something. It looked like visible blood, but I really couldn't see anything, due to the glare of the police lights and EMS strobes lighting up the area. His mother was also taken to the medical, and his father stayed at home. A day or two later, no one was at the home, and it looks like they moved out. Seems like they just up and left. We're in a little small town also, so I would think somebody would have seen somebody leave. I was able to cure my intense curiosity because a buddy of mine I went to high school with was an EMT that night at the house, and I was able to catch him at the local bar. Sitting at the bar, I go up to him and ask him, "Oscar, what the hell happened the other night?" He calmly looks at me, and with a and grin, he then responds, "Crazy shit." He told me that he, the son, snapped. Took a paring knife, stabbed his mother in the neck, then went after the old man. He, the father, was able to shove his son inside a closet and lock the door until police arrived. While inside the closet, the son then started a bellowing scream, almost like a howl. When police opened the door, he had taken the paring knife and stabbed all inside his navel, then gouged his right eye out. He screamed penance the whole way out of the home and all the way to the hospital. I then said, "Wow, do you think he just snapped?" My friend then said, "Nah, it's definitely the house." I then chuckled it off. The exact same night, later on, I saw what looked like people at the home. There was discarded furniture at the end of the lawn for trash couches, tables, chairs, and other things. I assume were clothes inside of black trash bags. It's not uncommon for people to search through trash or furniture, though, so I was going to look away. I noticed these things were like elderly people, hunched over, very skinny bodies and protruding round bellies. Seems like they're balding with very thin strands of cotton-like hair, illuminated by the dimming garage light. I go out to take a look further and I see two of them rummaging about the trash. One of them then goes around to the side of the home, no more than 4'4", tall, stocky build, and skin was like a pale, sweaty hide, arms short at the shoulder and long at the elbows. Also walked with a hobble, and disgustingly snorted in air as it walked. The other one was a bit taller, maybe around 5'11", short arms, long fingers, and long skinny legs. But walked hunched over. If stood up straight, maybe around 7'1". Both have very deep eye sockets. You can barely see any eyes. In total disbelief of what I'm seeing, I had to wake my wife up and show her. She then went and made salt water and said an African Orishas prayer, opened the door, poured the water on our doorstep and porch and closed it. When we watched the things try to get back inside the empty home, they were gone. I then find out that a lady lived there way before I was born, and she charged people to do seances. She was a medium. Needless to say, I don't live around there anymore.
I've lived in this house for pretty much my entire life with my parents, Nan, and brother. It's really old. This whole street was built like a couple hundred years ago, and it's really weird. Me and my brother are 90% sure it's actually haunted at this point. Our parents and Nan think we're nuts, but honestly, the houses around here are so old, I'm surprised they're not all haunted. My brother says he hears kids' voices at night sometimes. He thinks he's hearing a few little kids, and it's always been the exact same few voices, and he's been hearing them for more than 10 years, so it's probably not just the neighbors talking, or TV or something. He's never been able to hear them very well, so he's only ever caught a couple words. He says he's heard words like willow, country, downstairs, and the name Betty really clearly in the kids' voices. He's also heard a woman's voice say Thomas once. My room will sometimes randomly have this horrible chemical smell, like it smells like paint thinner or something. We've never been able to figure out where the smell is coming from. A few years ago, my parents even got the carpet pulled up partly because they thought the smell was in the carpet, but also because the carpet had a bunch of stains on it. Yeah, I was a messy kid. And nope, it didn't get rid of the smell. We also smell smoke sometimes, when there's really no reason to be smelling smoke. No one's cooking anything, there's no candles, nothing that explains the smell. The smoke alarms even go off sometimes. They've all been replaced and they still do it, so it doesn't seem like a problem with the actual alarms. Occasionally, there's also a gross burning smell, like burning rubber or something. We wouldn't have connected the smells to anything paranormal, except we always get this weird uncomfy feeling like something isn't right. And it's the same feeling my brother gets when he hears the voices. Last night, I was smelling the burning smell and the smoke, and my smoke alarm went off. I opened my door to let my mom in because she was carrying the stepladder, and behind her, I saw a pregnant woman in a long, old-fashioned dress kneeling on the floor with her hands over her face. I only saw her for a split second, but it was so clear. I also got this really sad feeling. I think she was crying or something, and I just felt so sad for her and kind of scared for her. Probably should have mentioned that my parents and my nan don't believe it's a ghost thing and thinks it's an old house thing, so they've been getting all kinds of professionals to check the wiring, check for gas leaks, check the roof. They even paid for the neighbors to get their wiring and stuff checked in case there was a problem in their places. You know, terraced houses, that type of thing. And nope, nothing.
I lived in northern Maine during my senior year in high school. It's rural and a very different lifestyle than I was used to. My father bought a very old and small farmhouse along the border with Canada. The house was a 2-story wood frame with a side porch, peeling paint, and a connected barn that was falling down. It was a depressing, creepy house with small rooms and an abundance of flies, spiders, and in the fall, many ladybugs. In the no longer used outhouse in the barn, we found a ratty, full-length bearskin coat. My father thought it was some sort of treasure, but I found it disturbing. The stairs to the barn loft were heavily chewed by porcupines, especially on the corners where they could easily bite. There was no actual central heating in the house. This is in one of the coldest areas of the country, where temperatures would drop to -30 in the winter. In the basement, there was an enormous wood-burning stove that had been fabricated by a former owner. Managed properly, it would heat the entire house, sort of. I got used to being cold all the time. I was always uneasy in that house. After we had been living there for a while, my father and his girlfriend would mention that they would have these strange experiences. They'd be lying in bed or on the couch and feel what they thought was a cat walking across their feet on top of the blankets. When they looked down, there was nothing there. They both mentioned it on several occasions, and it became a recurring theme. They would report that it would often happen when they were asleep, and sometimes it would be something touching their head or their hair. One time, my father was sitting on the toilet and felt something cold firmly pressed against his bare thigh, or so he said. During the winter sometime, my father mentioned at dinner one evening that he had seen a figure in the early morning hours that day. He had awakened in the night and was startled to see a woman standing next to his bed. She was leaning close to him and just looking at him. When he woke up, she moved away and stood by the window, looking out at the dooryard. Then she faded away. It was just beginning to get light outside, and he could see her from the faint, pale light coming in through the window. He described her as a woman around 35-40 and wearing a long dress. A little while after I had moved away and gone back to Massachusetts, I got an excited call from my friend Jennifer in Maine, whom I had known from high school. I had told her at some point about the odd things that happened in the house. She had been talking to someone on the day she called me, and somehow I came up in the conversation, and the guy she was talking to said, "Oh, that house used to live in is haunted. My cousin lived there several years ago. She said that you'd be lying in bed at night and you'd feel someone touch your hair." That independent corroboration freaked her out, and she couldn't wait to tell me about it. I felt the phantom touch once, I think on my feet. But that was really the extent of it, other than the awful, creepy, depressing aspect of the entire house. I would be home alone there a lot, and even in the daytime, I would get scared in that house. More than 20 years later, I returned to the area while on vacation with my wife. I wanted to see the house again and show her where I had lived. So we drove the 12 miles south from Holton on US 1 to Wilcox Settlement Road. The house was still there, but it had gotten even creepier. Most of the siding had been torn off in an apparently abandoned project to add insulation to the thin walls. There was junk strewn about. An old battered pickup truck sat in the dooryard. It made me feel so sad to see the house in even worse condition than it was when I had lived there. We stared at the house from the road where we had stopped. The car was idling in gear at the end of the driveway as we were talking in the scene. Where the house had seemed forlorn in 1987, in 2006, it had become an eyesore. The house had always seemed to me like a place where bad things might happen to someone, and because it was in a quiet, sparsely populated, and densely forested place, those things, and the person they happened to might be forgotten, or at least never mentioned again by the terms of the silent agreement, a familial shame. Suddenly, a movement in the dooryard caught my eye. There was a man standing between the pickup truck and the front door, and he was watching us. I couldn't believe that we hadn't seen him. A disheveled, overweight man in a brown outdoor jacket. He was smiling, and nodding his head slowly and waving his arm in a sweeping, beckoning motion, encouraging us to come closer. He didn't approach us, or look at us with suspicion. He was just silent, just nodding, smiling, beckoning. Come closer. That's right. Closer. I pressed the gas pedal to the floor and sped off. The road more or less dead-ended a short ways down where the pavement petered out. I knew this, but had kind of driven off in a panic and had to turn around and drive past the house again. I don't remember seeing the man on the second pass, or if we even looked. I don't know why he was waving unexpected, out-of-staters, in his dooryard in the waning daylight, but at that time, I assumed that it had something to do with making sausages and grimy meat pies. Maybe it's not a place itself that's bad. Maybe it's that a place gets marked with an indelible, psychic stain that becomes smeared and darkened with repeated abuses and horrors. A depression in which negative feelings and energy pull and swirl and engulf those who come in contact with it. I feel that it was already darkly stained when we arrived, and while we were there, it became darker still. I don't know what it would take to erase stains like that. Sometimes, you visit a place from your past seeking catharsis, but it just tears off the scab and rubs dirt in the wound. I'll never visit that place again, but I don't think it will ever leave me.
We had a new house built in a new suburb of Perth, Western Australia. My husband, myself, and our 22-year-old son moved in. After living there for around 6-7 months, we'd finished the decor, etc., and we'd started to settle in a little better. One night, I had gone to bed early, as I was really tired. My husband decided to stay up and finish watching the movie, and our son was in his room playing his games on his computer. Our son is a serious gamer, and stays up till around 3 in the morning, only coming out of his room for toilet, food and to shower. I had fallen asleep straight away, but later, I heard my husband coming in and going to the bathroom, and felt him getting into bed. I went back to sleep. Sometime later, I woke to my husband fidgeting around, and I asked him what was wrong. He said he couldn't sleep. His mind will not switch off. So I asked him what time it was. He said it was 11:45. I then suggested he take a sleeping tablet. He goes to the kitchen for a glass of water, comes back, and takes the tablet. Again, I go back to sleep. This is what my husband told me had happened. He said he was laying on his back, looking up at the ceiling, waiting for the tablet to kick in, when he heard the drawers and cupboards in the kitchen opening and closing, and what sounded like all the pots and pans being stacked up high. He thought our son had got hungry and was making a feast, as what he heard was like every pot and pan being used. He said he remembers thinking to himself, I hope he cleans that mess up or Mum won't be happy. When he got up for work the next day, he went into the kitchen to switch the kettle on, and the kitchen was spotless. He thought, oh, good lad for cleaning up. He knocked on our son's door to get him up for work. When our son came out into the kitchen, he said, wow, you had a bit of a feast last night. With all that noise you were making, you must have used every pot in the house. Our son said, no, Dad, that wasn't me. I thought it was you. This story took place in the same house as my previous story, The Noisy Ghost. The summers here in Western Australia can be extremely hot, and this happened on a hot summer's night. My hubby came in from work and had his dinner, and then took a shower to cool down. He put on his loose cotton PJ bottoms and no top, and decided to watch some movies that were downloaded onto a USB. He was having a couple of beers and decided to relax for the rest of the evening. I was in the kitchen tidying away after dinner and getting myself ready to watch my favourite series in the bedroom. We had 3 TVs, one in the main bedroom, one in the theatre room, and one in the living area. Hubby decided to watch his movie in the living room. He plugged the USB in and got to where he had to choose a movie. He chose the one he wanted, but it didn't play. He tried this a few times, but he got fed up and then decided to try the TV in the theatre room. Same problem. He couldn't figure it out, as he had watched many movies before on both TVs. So, lastly, he decided to try the TV in the bedroom. He came in and asked if he could try the TV as the other 2 were not playing the movie. I agreed. He tried and no, nothing. We both thought it was odd, but I suggested the computer in the office. Hubby wasn't too happy about it, as the chair is small and uncomfortable. Not like a nice big padded chair to recline back into and chill. The office is open planned, and it's got no doors to it. So I get up and close the bedroom door, as hubby loves action movies and has them on very loud. I settle back down on the bed with my tea and biscuits as my series was about to start. And then, all of a sudden, the bedroom door springs open. My hubby leaps onto the bed. He's wide-eyed, fixed, looking ahead to the office. I look at him and ask what's wrong. He doesn't answer. I ask him again, and then he tells me. He put the USB in the computer. He chose what he wanted to watch. Waiting for it to start, he felt a hand grab him on the shoulder. He said he felt all 4 digits and thumb and proceeded to show me where and the pressure he felt, bearing in mind he had no top on. To say it freaked him out is an understatement. He refused to go in the office and turn the movie off. I had to go in and do it. For a while after, I had to sit in with him, if he used the computer. And he's a stocky builder who has been in a lot of fights in his time. But this one just scared the absolute hell out of him.
I grew up in a very active house. My folks moved there when I was 3, and I lived there for the next 20 years. Looking back, I guess it was pretty crazy. But if you grow up in it, you kinda just get used to it. Anyway, I'll post some of the experiences, starting at the least strange, from my perspective anyway. First off, the house was always filled with usual strange noises you hear about. Invisible people walking on the stairs, knocking, whispers. One phenomenon that seemed to follow me around especially was pennies from heaven, where small objects fall down out of thin air. Small toys like matchbox cars, little farm animals, etc. would fall on and or around me. The toilets would randomly flush at different times of the day. My sister and I shared a room when we were younger. It had a small walk-in closet our mum used. You could watch the doorknob turn and door open. Our mum always assured us it was just an unlevel door. We could always hear movement, scratching, that kind of stuff our mum insisted was the guinea pig. When we were older and the guinea pig died and the noises didn't, and we realized an unlevel door still wouldn't turn the handle of said door, we confronted our mum about it. She smirked and said, "Yeah, but would you have ever felt safe or slept if I told you the truth?" We honestly weren't upset by this. Again, you grow up in it, and you don't really get attacked, aside from small unexplained scratches and bruises. You kind of figure it either isn't going to, or can't hurt you. Anyway, that's some of the small stuff we lived with every day. Here is one more story. Just to warn you guys, I know some of you are going to find this experience anticlimactic, but all I can say is that from my standpoint, this was a very powerful and scary experience. I was 16 or so, and had to go to the basement for some reason, which, honestly, I can't even remember now. But as I was down there, I heard movement behind me, and a raspy breath sound. Before I can even turn around, there was a thunderous booming. The entire basement seemed to shake. I honestly thought the house was coming down on my head, crashing and banging and booming. It truly was deafening. The feeling I will never be able to get across. I could feel this thing, this whatever, all around me. I have no shame. I turned and ran, as fast as I could. I dashed up the stairs and out the door to the back patio. I hung onto the doorknob, not daring to let go. I stood, staring, my eyes not leaving the door, waiting for something to pull the curtain back and peer at me through the glass. I'm sure it was seconds, but it felt like forever. My knuckles white on the knob. Nothing happened. I fished the keys out, one-handed, and locked the door. Only then letting go and stepping back and looking at the house, wondering if the roof caved in or a drunk driver crashed into the house. I walked around the house and back in, shaken. And this is where it gets kind of good. My dad was immediately like, "What did you do?" And it turns out my dad and my mum and sister all heard the banging, but from their side, they said it sounded like it was coming from the basement. From my side, it sounded like it was coming from above me. All this time, my dad was still insisting we were all crazy and there was nothing in the house. He would eventually admit that he had seen, felt, or heard things in the house as well. This incident was in fact the turning point. So he said it was nothing. I had scared myself, and knocked over a workbench or something, and that I had to go down and clean it up. I flatly refused. My dad grumbled but went down to clean up my mess. He was gone for several minutes. I told my mum and sister about what happened in the basement. When he returned, we all looked at him expectantly. I said, "So what fell?" He looked pretty sheepish and muttered, "Nothing." Everything was where it was supposed to be. All that horrible noise we heard, and nothing was out of place. It was a while before I went back to the basement. The experience, honestly, scared me. Hello watchers and listeners, thank you so much for watching. A huge thank you to all the Reddit users who kindly allowed me to use their stories. And also a huge thank you to all my fellow narrators who kindly gave up their time to help me put this one together. I truly do appreciate you all so much. You will find links to each story as well as a link to each narrator's channel in the description below. If you'd like to help support this channel, there's also links to both my Patreon and my Teespring store, so feel free to have a look if you're interested. And the biggest thank you to all of you who continue to support me. I truly do appreciate it. And remember,
Papa loves you.